Francisco Bay Area Moms is joined today by the CEO of Upfront, Dana Levin Robinson, and we're going to talk about childcare, especially during COVID. So welcome, Dana. First, tell me about Upfront. What is it?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So Upfront, our website is allupfront.com. We are a pricing directory to help parents find daycares and preschools. And the most important thing is we let you search by budget because we're the ones collecting the prices from users, from the daycares themselves. And that's not something parents have been previously able to do, is actually be able to filter down their options by budget.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great tool. Tell me, let's talk big picture first off. What does the childcare, daycare, preschool landscape look like for 2021?
It's so difficult. And particularly in large cities right now that, are seeing some new surges of cases, but it's a very different situation. We're really seeing this, particularly with San Francisco and New York as well, is that daycares that used to have huge waiting lists, the ones that we used to joke about, you had to put your kid on the list before you were ever pregnant, have spots available. They have availability because a lot of parents have been very hesitant about putting their child in daycare, even though the cases actually haven't been supporting that decision. And, we are seeing that children are not transmitting as much. So there's definitely a lot more availability. A lot of parents have elected to either, leave the kid at home, work with a nanny, or then, or actually just leave the city entirely. So daycares and preschools are struggling right now.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I understand from Childcare Aware, the average childcare fees are more than what families spend on food and transportation combined. Now, that might be pre-COVID, or I'm sure you can give some insight too, but that in as many as 28 states, the average cost for childcare for one child in daycare is higher than tuition at a 4-year public college. That's a lot to unpack. So Absolutely. What insights do you have about that data?
Yeah, it's actually for about half of the country. Childcare is the second largest expenditure of a household after housing. So we're always talking about how expensive it is to buy a house, and talking about the real estate struggles, but nobody really talks about childcare. And that's where, we feel very strongly that we all know it's a large expenditure, right? We're always talking about how expensive kids are, but there's never really been an opportunity to actually find something, by that price and know how much those prices are really until we came along. The averages that we're seeing on average for San Francisco is about $2,200, which is pretty a month, which is pretty standard for, a large city. As you can imagine, there's quite a bit of variation within the neighborhood. Sure. Unsurprisingly, Soma, big tech hub, a lot of startups, $3,200 a month. That's a lot of money. That's coming up on your rent, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Where you're seeing things like the Mission, probably a little lower, around $2,800, but still really expensive. And then sort of like the western part of San Francisco, like Parkside, Outer Sunset, around the $1,600. So you are kind of seeing a correlation generally with household income and sort of how how busy that area is, but. Yeah, it is a lot of money. And I think, I have a recent baby and everyone always talks about the stroller and the car seat. Well, nobody really talks about the recurring expense of childcare.
Yeah, that's something you should probably put on your baby registry is.
Yeah, exactly. I always said whoever invents the Zola for babies is a genius.
Yes. Instead of a $529 for higher ed, it needs to be something for childcare.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I wish as a baby registry you can have a cash fund for daycare.
Right. Oh my gosh. Now I know. Do you have any plans, or are you currently looking at data in the East Bay or any of the surrounding area of San Francisco, or what does that look like for Upfront?
Yeah, so right now we're mostly in San Francisco proper. We're actually literally as we speak, we've been growing pretty fast, but we are looking to add East Bay areas like San Mateo, like Marin County. So we absolutely are going to expand pretty aggressively. California, just being one of the most populated states, just makes a lot of sense for us.
Right.
So I think literally within the next month, like we're going to see most of the state filled out. It's just because this data is so hard to get, you know, working with the daycares, working with users and finding them who are using these daycares, it's pretty.
But yeah, even anecdotally, there are many families moving even to the East Bay, and I'm even east of Oakland. And so we see it a lot on, you know, the next
Oakland,
door app.
Berkeley, yep.
Mhm.
All on our list. And
Yeah.
and we know also a lot of people, I mean, San Francisco is a commuter town, right? I mean,
Yes.
I live in New York and it's exactly the same situation. And people do tend to choose childcare and daycares that are near where they live versus where they work. It's just easier, you know, you drop off the kid, you go to work. But I think, and also now we're seeing exactly that as people work from home, they are more likely to just go nearby them, you know, especially as a lot of the tech offices have been closing.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. My husband works at Pinterest, and like they have no plans to reopen their site.
Same with my husband's company, who is based out of San Francisco.
Yeah, that's it now. So, what are some obstacles that parents are facing when they're looking for childcare? Obviously, finances can be one, but what are some other obstacles that you notice?
Yeah, and I'll kind of break down childcare as a term within daycares as a type of childcare, right? So you also have nannies as an option, or, you know, a shared nanny arrangement, you know, so it's really sort of one of those, like two that you really can go down the path of. Sure. So, you know, with daycare specifically is the safety thing. They are socializing with other households. And other adults, and, you know, you want to make sure that safety precautions are taken, that, you know, everyone's sanitizing the toys all the time, masks are being worn by 2+, so it does get really difficult. And, you know, 2-year-olds don't really like wearing their masks, right? They're 2-year-olds, they don't like doing a lot of things, so it's really, so I think I know a lot of parents are very cautious. And one of the trends that we've actually seen from an enrollment perspective is a lot of parents are choosing sort of the larger, more corporate daycares like the Bright Horizons, the KinderCare. I think like in a weird, like kind of gut feeling, they feel like maybe there's more liability in a strange way, or more likely for like rules to be followed as coming from a corporate franchise. Sure. I don't know how accurate that is on you know, based on each location. I'm sure there's variability, but that's a lot of what we've heard. And then on the other side of childcare, you know, having a nanny, people are working from home. It gets crowded. It's really, really tough. And, you know, if you have 2 adults working, and the kid and the nanny, it gets crowded. So actually we have heard of some families who were thinking of getting a nanny, but actually ended up going in daycare just to get the kid out of the house. Like, just, you know, just like we just need some quiet to actually get some work done. And I think that's especially true in some of the larger cities where, you know, you're probably living in a 1-bedroom, maybe a 2-bedroom, and it's just, you know, spaces that are real privilege.
Right. And you can't go to the local coffee shop and sit and work.
Exactly. So, and especially in the winter. So it's really, we've seen it just go so many directions, you know, families that were going to daycares and now have nannies, who had nannies and now go to daycares. And it really just is so individual, just the response, and very hard to predict.
Interesting. So what are some things that parents should consider when they're beginning a child care search, or, you know, figuring out what's right for them? What are some of the main things to consider?
So the 2 biggest variables, like every parent we talk about, really comes down to what can you afford and where do you want, you know, what's your location? So find out, you know, do you want it convenient from where you live or versus like your work, you know, so they really kind of essentially put the little radius around where you feel comfortable. Like, are there good subways to, you know, to take the kid? So really kind of those 2 factors. And then of course, what you can afford, which generally kind of has a ceiling. So, you know, those are really the first 2 places to search. And it's not a coincidence that if you go on our homepage, that's literally the 2 fields, you know, we ask someone to search for is what is your price range? What is your zip code? Because we know that generally speaking, that will cull down your options list by a good like 70–80%, and you're not going to be wasting a lot of time looking at things that you can't afford. I mean, we did pretty extensive market research when we launched the company, and we got things like 62% of parents actually went on a tour of a daycare they couldn't afford. And to us, like, you know, we hear things like that and we just think like, think about how many wasted hours that represents.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
we're all, we're parents, we're busy, we don't have time to now go in person, especially like even pre-COVID and then find out you get this, like, this like sticker shock and you're like, I would have never wasted my time. This makes absolutely no sense. So really, I would say the budget and the location are really sort of the two things that end up filtering a lot of decision. And my biggest advice would be look at that list afterwards, see how many options you have. And if you live in a large city, you generally have at least 8 to 10 that could be a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then run it by some of your friends. That's what a lot of other parents do, is try to get the opinions of like, what's been your experience? Facebook, parenting Facebook groups, there's a ton of content there. If you search for any of those daycares, there's going to be a ton coming up. An interesting insight that we actually did a comparison on is comparing Google ratings versus price, basically answering the question of, are the more expensive daycares higher rated? And they're not. So actually, it doesn't matter. Like there's some great value at a lower price point, and great daycares at a higher price point. So it's really, parenting Facebook groups and then asking your friends is really sort of that second step.
That's great. That's great advice. Well, you mentioned going on tours and what that might look like. And I'm sure now during COVID, it's even different. But if you have the ability to go on the tour and you've used Upfront, and so that it is within your budget and something, with kind of that budget and that location, what are some of the red flags that you should be looking for when you're on a tour of a facility or interviewing even, and
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, obviously the safety and hygiene is more important than ever. It was always important, but now really important. Are the adults wearing masks? Do you see hand sanitizing sections? Are the kids mingled in different cohorts, or are they keeping them in the same, on average about 8 kids for each group, or are they kind of mingling? Are parents allowed to actually drop their kid off, or are they, being picked up curbside, which sounds so awful, but I mean,
right.
but I mean, the parents usually will drop them off, like we'll have them in the curb and then someone will come grab them. I know I feel bad saying that, but so absolutely that. A thing is to actually find out about the employees themselves. What is the ratio of teachers to students? You generally want to see, a lot of teachers, like that's just more attention to all of the kids. Your child will get more attention. So you want to ask that. You want to ask about the employee turnover. Daycares in particular are pretty famous for high employee turnover. So you want to make sure that, if you're hearing the average is 6 months, that might not be the best place to work or the best environment. You're also just going to have constant turnover for your kid, like especially if you have a kid with allergies or food sensitivities or medications, that can be really hard to kind of have a long-term relationship with. Hours are really important to most parents, and finding out the flexibility there. Some daycares, especially ones that cater to people with pretty demanding jobs, which a lot of people in San Francisco have, will be open as late as like 7:30 versus the usual 6. So all of those are really important, and just find that it works for your lifestyle.
Right. Just because, I mean, states set their, teacher to student ratios, but just because, whatever that ratio is, if there's even more teachers, it's even better.
It's usually good.
Yeah.
And I would say the other thing to find out, and this is kind of like a little bonus COVID one, is I know a lot of families are considering leaving the cities. Everyone's life, especially with working from home, is so in flux. I would find out what your contract obligations are when you sign for the daycare, because some daycares did used to ask for like a 6-month, commitment at the beginning. And now generally a lot of them are on a month-to-month basis. You just have to give a 30-day notice, but still worth confirming that, especially if you're considering leaving, and relocating.
Right. That is a great point. And I think one that we wouldn't be thinking about right now, because like you mentioned, people would get on wait lists before they were even pregnant or when they were first pregnant. And, it's just, the landscape is different right now.
And it's particularly more true even for preschools than daycares, because preschools, a lot of them are priced by academic year. Yes. So you generally are committing to a 1-year program, and that's a long time during a year where honestly none of us know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. Very true. So As a Bay Area parent, if now that the data is from Upfront that you've kind of reached out here into California, like what would my next step be? Like if I wanted to check out the website and I was ready to, get some more information, how should I do that?
Yeah, so if you go on our website and you find what's in your budget, what's near you, we try to make it as easy as possible. We're here to make parents' lives easier as possible. So we have the daycare's website on there. We have their phone number. We're actually adding a new functionality very shortly about automatically requesting a tour through our site, that it just goes to the email, to the daycare. The challenge there is obviously that involves us working with the daycare, making sure the email is the correct location.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want a lot of people to send emails and then, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yep.
So we do try to give you all the information in one place. We have hours. We show you on a map exactly where it is, so you're not trying to guess based on an address. So we really do try to make it as easy as possible. We allow you to save it to your profile, so that way you can actually have like a very small short list, share via text or email, because we know a lot of parents, one parent usually is the one who searches and then the other one, kind of consults. So we really do try to make it as easy as possible.
Great. Excellent. Anything else that you would want to add or that we may have missed? I think we hit on a lot of the big issues for parents right now.
Yeah, I would just say, if this is okay to say, if people can go on our site and submit more numbers, we really see what we're doing as almost a public service of we're here to help parents. We don't charge any parents to look at any of our data. We don't gate it. We really are not, we really see this for users by users, some kind of like how Glassdoor does salaries, we do that with prices. So really, if you are sending your kid to a daycare or preschool and you want to be helpful to future parents, that'd be great.
That's great. It's kind of like giving a review too. Just the more data and the more numbers, the better the picture for everybody.
Yeah, and parents find that so, valuable and so useful. It just, especially now where, you're not passing by, you can't really pop into, to the location. So it's really like the quicker you can make a decision and find out your option, the better it is for you.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dana, for joining us today. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.